Did you get your,
I printed it twice, and I know I got it off the printer.
you got
yeah, I got
signed in and all that?
Not yet, but she told me.
Can
Okay.
we print something, Desiree?
Yes.
Possibly?
Yes, ma'am.
We are live. You're ready to go.
We are live?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll forward it to you.
All right, we have a quorum. We're gonna start. It is 5:02 on November 14th. I'd like to call the meeting of the Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee to order. And we'll start with item number 1, which is roll call.
Jeff Marks.
Alex Robinette.
Brian Ryder.
Jay Van Bavel.
Dave Bench.
Duke Garwood.
Okay. very
And
good.
Tom Farrell's on Zoom.
And Tom Farrell's on Zoom.
Hey,
Wonderful.
Tom.
Good morning.
All right. Now we're going to open up the floor for public comments. Or do we have any public comments today, Desiree?
I don't have any signed in.
All right, okay.
We have public members.
There's an opportunity.
Speak on an item that's on the agenda.
I'm sorry?
They may be willing to speak on an item that's on the agenda, or they
That could be. That could be. Okay, very good. All right. We'll move along to the consent agenda, which consists of only one thing, and that is the minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve minutes from last time.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to... Oh! Tom, did you vote?
I did. I voted aye.
Thank you. All right, we captured that, so it was unanimous. Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving along to item number 3 now on the regular agenda, discussion and possible action on CRC survey status, results, and next steps. And to that point, I would like to introduce Megan Lamont. Am I saying that right? And she is with us from Bowie Company to talk a little bit about how the survey, as we've seen it, has completed, right?
Wonderful.
And I think she has got it shown up here on the big screen, which is great.
It's not beautifully colored, though.
All right.
All right, very good. Well, thank you all for having me here. As Dave mentioned, my name is Megan Lamont, and I am part of the Bowie Company team. As y'all know, we were brought on to help kind of oversee and manage the CRCRC survey, as well as authenticate the results for this committee. So tonight we have a presentation prepared with the authenticated results. I've been working really closely with Sarah O'Brien, who y'all know from past meetings. And so we authenticated the results in a couple of ways. So first was by making sure that everyone's addresses were indeed Rollingwood addresses of current residents. We also made sure that anyone who owns multiple properties in Rollingwood was not submitting multiple responses for each of those properties. And then lastly, we also checked IP addresses, again, to make sure that people weren't submitting multiple responses for the same person. So this survey here represents a summary of all of the authenticated survey results. So I will kind of walk through each of these slides, review the question, and then the percentage of replies for each one. Just to note, we are not including the comments in this. We received over 2,000 comments, so we were leaving those for this committee to kind of analyze and discuss, but I'll be going through each of the questions. So if y'all have any questions before I get started, otherwise we can dive in. All right. So total survey response, we had 274 responses. That included 2,265 total written comments. And of those 274 responses, we had 219 individual households represented there. So 55 of those 274 were responses where 2 people in the same household both submitted a survey.
It might be worth mentioning that 2,265 comments constitutes about 37 pages at 60 per page. It was a mouthful.
Yes. yeah, a lot of great comments.
We were blessed.
Or cursed. Depends on your point of view.
And so just a little bit about community outreach. So I know that this committee, did a great job really getting out in the community and promoting the survey, encouraging folks to submit it. So that was done by 444 door hangers with the postcards that we designed for residents. Those were distributed through block walking. The committee also tabled at the Trunk or Treat event. The survey was sent out to several listservs, including the Rollingwood Men's and Women's Clubs, as well as Councilmember Glisheen's email newsletter. And then it was also shared through Rollingwood channels, through the city website's latest news, as well as social media. So just wanted to give that snapshot of how the survey was disseminated into the community. All right, well, we'll go ahead and start diving into the responses. So these first couple questions here are just sort of general about Rollingwood's building codes. So question 1, are you generally satisfied with the trend of new construction in Rollingwood? This was a pretty even split, with 51.67 saying yes and 48.33% saying no. Again, lots of comments for each of these that I know y'all will be diving deeper into. Question 2, do you think Rollingwood should consider changes to its building codes? We had 68.5 say yes and 31.5 say no. The next couple questions are about building height. Question 3, is Rollingwood's maximum residential building height of 35 feet too high, not high enough, or about right? We had 26.22% say it is too high, 7.87 say it's not high enough, and 65.92% say it's about right. Question 4, should we look at alternate ways to measure building height? And if so, which of the ways above would you prefer? This question had a diagram with these 3 different scenarios. So we had 65.77 say yes, 34.23 say no. And then just a little bit more information for the people in the comments who specified their preferred measure of building height. Of those comments, we had 22 people prefer scenario 1, 26 prefer scenario 2, and 75 people preferred scenario 3 for measuring building height. Question 5, should we measure the maximum height of a home with a flat roof differently than one with a pitched roof? 37.5 yes, 62.5 no. Okay, now we'll go into FAR. Should we consider adding FAR and or ratio of building footprint to lot size to Rollingwood's building code? Very even split here, 50.57 yes and 49.43 no. These next couple of questions are about setbacks. Question 7, please indicate your feelings on Rollingwood's current setback dimensions. So we had 11.9 say that they are too large, 22.3 say they're too small, and 65.8 say that they're about right. Please indicate your general feelings on the new setback projection limits described above. Again, there was a table or a kind of diagram accompanying this. And clarify if you have concerns specific to roof or bay windows, those would be in the comments. But for this one, we had 22.18 say too much, 12.84 say too little, and 64.98 say it's about right. Question 9, should we consider any limitations on what can be built along a setback? 60.08 said yes, 39.92 said no. Question 10, should we develop a set of tenting rules for Rollingwood that restrict building height along a setback? 56.08 said yes, and 43.92 said no. All right, moving into stories. Question 11, should we limit the number of allowable stories? The first option was yes, limit to a number of allowable stories. That was 38.89%. And then no, which was do not limit the number of stories provided that the resident meets all other code requirements. That was 61.11% for no. Question 12, should we restrict overall area of additional floors above a certain level? That was 36.98% yes, 63.02% no. All right, circular driveways. Should we reconsider code limitations placed on circular driveways for corner lot that connects two streets? That was 58.21% yes and 41.79% no. And then light pollution, question 14. Should we examine some aspects of a dark sky initiative in our residential code that may include exterior and landscape lighting? 57.46 said yes, 42.54 said no. All right, trees. Question 15 asked how high of a priority are trees in Rollingwood on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. So we had 42.34 people give it a 5%. Of people give it a 5. 32.12 give it a 4. 16.79 give it a 3. 4.01 give it a 2. And then 4.74 say it was a 1 of the lowest priority. Question 16, is the current tree ordinance doing enough to save protected and heritage trees? 56.8 said yes, 43.2 said no. Question 17, should we consider a plan sponsored by the city or private donations to plant additional trees with owner approval in public right-of-way? That was 82.4% yes and 17.6 no. All right. Zoning by topography, should we consider the creation of special zoning districts for unusual lots? This one was very split, with 49.62 yes and 50.38 no. Fencing, question 19, should there be a height limit on side and backyard fences? 46.3 said yes and 53.7 said no. Question 20, should more be done to limit the amount of impervious cover on a building lot? 39.08% said yes, and 60.92% said no. Right. Question 21, have you built or significantly remodeled a home in Rollingwood in the last 10 years? 46.49 said yes, 53.51 said no. Question 22, were the applicable building permit rules understandable? 37.74 said yes, 12.83 said no, and then 49.43 did not apply to them. Question 23, did you find working with the city easy and efficient? What, if anything, would you change? 31.68 said yes, 21.37 said no, and then you see the remaining 46.95 did not apply. Have you lived in your recent build? 88.93 said yes, and 11.07 said no. Question 25, did you receive adequate notice of the building permit? 73.88 said yes, 15.67 said no, and then the remaining 10% did not apply. And then just really quick, so that last question was 25. And then we kind of jumped to 28. So just to clarify, question 26 was an open-ended question asking about issues or concerns you had while living near construction. So that is an open-ended question, so it was not included here. And then question 27 is asking for the addresses, which we have omitted from the results to keep everything anonymous. So just wanted to note those two questions being skipped here. These last couple are all respondent demographics. So question 28, please check any that apply to you in Rollingwood. You'll see these percentages add up to more than 100 because we had many people check more than one box. But just to summarize, we had 96.7% of people say that they own their home, 9.52 own more than one property, 3.3 own a rental home, 1.83 are renting the home that they live in, 15.75 built or are currently building their home, 6.59% are planning to build, and then we did not have any responses of builders or investors that don't live in Rollingwood. How long have you lived in Rollingwood? This was a pretty even split across these sections, so 24.82, less than 5 years, a little over 20%, 5 to 10 years, 26%, 11 to 20, a little over 11% for 21 to 30, and then 30 plus years, we had 17.52%. Just a breakdown of age demographics, 1.48% for 18 to 34, 39.11% 35 to 49, 32.84% people ages 50 to 64, 64 plus was 23.25%, and then a handful of folks who declined to answer. And then this last question is annual household income. 41%, just to note, did not preferred not to answer, but you can see the breakdown of household income there. So that is the survey results. I will happily answer any questions that y'all may have, or if you want to go back to any of them. Yeah.
One question is, it looks like about 10% are owners of more than one property that responded to the survey. Yet you weeded out anybody like that who gave more than one response?
Correct. So people who checked that they own more than one property, they were not able to submit multiple responses. Say if they owned multiple properties in Rollingwood, they can't submit a response from each of those addresses.
So in terms of owners responding to the survey, they're underrepresented in the total then, in that case. They own multiple properties, but they're only allowed to give one response. So I just want to put that out there to realize that, you know, their opinions are a little undervalued.
Do you think? Do you think?
Well, if you're looking for an opinion per owned property,
Yeah.
and they only submit one opinion for that, let's say they own 3 properties.
Yeah, but we're asking citizens of Rollingwood what they think, you know, and to give a citizen opportunity for more than one response, I think that overvalues that one citizen's response. I mean, I think I see it upside down from what you're seeing.
I agree with Dave. If we let someone who owned 3 houses enter 3 different enter the same response 3 times, it's overvaluing that one person's opinion.
Well, they own 3 properties though.
Well, they don't get 3 votes when we go to vote for city council.
What if they had one house that was 3 times the size? Should they get?
There you go. There you go. Well, the other thing is that some of these people, we have renters who have responded to this.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a household in the rented house that did respond to the survey, and righteously so, I think.
It wasn't
Probably. We don't have a way to test that, I don't think, because we didn't ask if you own multiple houses, what are their addresses? So we can't really track exactly what the renter said.
Do we know? I guess we don't. We don't know that for sure, that the renters who responded live in a house that has been responded to by someone who said they have a rental house. Did that make sense?
We do know, you provided the list of the people who own multiple properties.
Mm-hmm.
And we verified that those people didn't submit a response for each of those properties. But yes, we do have renters here. We did have renters in the responses.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if we know if they
Connect with the people who
Exactly.
responded to have rentals.
I think we
Right.
did have some data that told us that if somebody owned multiple properties, and one of which was a rental house, the renter filled out that survey
Mhm.
and not the owner twice. And I think we made a decision that that was
And that's the right thing.
acceptable.
Yeah, that was the right thing.
And we also made that decision, maybe before you were here, we discussed that we felt like only one person, regardless of the number of properties they own, should fill out the survey.
And that's fine, I'm just making an observation
Okay.
that those people might feel that they're impact was not what it should be if they own 3 properties. If you're surveying property owners, if you're surveying households, then perhaps one household.
You know, and I think that's what we were trying to do.
Yeah,
And
we
I
can
don't
maybe
think
do that
those
way.
numbers are gonna skew
No.
That's a good question.
the percentages in some significant way.
Yeah.
A basic question from someone who knows nothing about polling, is this a large enough sample that we can just grab those numbers and use them? Is it really a representative sample of how residents in the community feel?
I think that's a question for us.
Pardon?
It's
Well,
really a question for us in terms
but-
of how do we interpret it. I mean,
Well, I know, but first thing we have to do is decide whether it's valid or whether we have to interpret it with some fudge factor in there for unknown. At least that's what it's, but I don't know anything about polling. I'm kind of-
Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, what do you
Well,
think,
we are
Megan?
also not polling or statistics experts, so I don't know if I feel comfortable saying that this is for sure an accurate statistical representation. But I do know that of y'all passed out 450 postcards, I believe, and we had well over half of those people respond to this. So I would say we've had a very strong response based on the number of households that are here in Rollingwood. So I think that's really for this committee to decide kind of how you want to interpret those. And I think certainly the comments that I know Alex has really been diving into, I think the comments also provide a lot of insight beyond just the numbers that are here. So
I think a 50% sampling is pretty darn good.
yeah,
You
I
know,
would
you're not
agree.
going to get that at the New York Times.
And people were given multiple opportunities at length to respond if they were gonna respond, so if they're not gonna respond, I don't know. I think they're just trusting the process that the right thing will happen. So-
Yeah. To me, the last time we spoke together, I was a little bit concerned about where we were with regard to response. Whenever the numbers finally came in, I was delighted.
Yeah.
I think that it surpassed expectations. We almost got 300 people. That's great. You know, so and looking at the comments themselves, you know, you see a lot of uniformity in those comments. So it's not like there's not a whole lot of outliers, and there's a lot of folks that are saying many of the same things over and over again. So I think we've captured the opinion. The opening paragraph says, we're trying to determine whether or not Rollingwood has the appetite for change, or is it a possibility? And I think that we got a thumbs up on it. Yes, there is some appetite.
The question about, question 21 is, have you built or significantly remodeled, et cetera? If they answered no to that, did they get the other questions to answer?
Yes, they did still get the other questions.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
Okay.
So if they said no to that, then the subsequent questions about like working with the city, if they found that easy. If they did not remodel a home, they're still given that question, but most people just selected not applicable.
Okay. I was wondering, because 22, most of them was not applicable. I wanted to make sure that meant there were people that didn't build a house.
Correct.
Okay.
How did these percentages stack up against historically the previous survey?
it's a good question. Yeah, I haven't done the comparison with you.
On the commercial survey, these are fairly consistent with the numbers we got on the commercial survey.
In terms of turnout or the responses?
The number of responses.
What was it? What did we say was last time for?
I thought we had something like 400 in the commercial survey, Tom.
There were multiple that came in on that, but I think we had 229 houses that were represented.
I recall a 200 plus number.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had multiple household responses. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
It looks like we had 55 or something like that, and you had more than 55.
Well, if you took the housing, I think we were at, I don't remember the exact number, Dave, but I think it was 229
Oh,
homes that were represented, and we're at 218 homes that are represented.
okay.
It's fairly consistent, I think.
Very good. Better than I thought.
And-
Even better.
And my experience is if you get 50% of the residents that respond, then in Rollingwood, that is incredibly well representative of what's coming out on that. I think, Brian, I think you and I were, and Duke, you were probably there, but when we bought the park, we were only able to get 55% of the vote to buy the ballpark that we have in our city of the voters that turned out. So I use that as an example of turnout on something that's really important to the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very
But
good.
my comment we got 2,000 responses, comments. People
Yes.
really paid attention.
They did.
That's what that indicates to me. It indicates we have a very verbal group of people living in our city.
Yes.
But they paid attention.
The quality of the comments is really high too.
It's all,
Yeah, it's
Literally
well
on
thought.
point.
It's not just people just blasting something onto a sheet of paper. It was really, this is what I think,
yeah.
And it's the yay and nays, both sides of it.
I didn't agree with some of them, but.
Well, of course. Well, you can't.
But
You're not allowed to agree with them all.
That's what the survey showed.
Survey shows.
Right.
What else do we know, Megan?
Any other questions for me?
You guys did an amazing job.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you
did.
so
Yeah.
much.
Appreciate that.
Great
Thank you
job
for
with
working
the
with us.
presentation.
Yeah, and
Yes,
for
it
all
was
the quick
delightful.
responses to all of our questions and
Yeah.
emails, so thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate y'all bringing us on. And
Well,
yeah.
it was delightful
Good
to
good
have the
responses.
survey close at midnight on the 5th and to actually have the data on the 6th. That was incredible,
Yeah.
just to have it.
Yeah. Well, I got to
So-
give credit to SurveyMonkey. They make it very easy.
Yeah, well, I don't know this monkey person, but. Okay.
Very good.
Well, good. Well, we're going to continue this discussion among ourselves. And let me just ask, who has read all of the comments?
All of
That's
them?
pretty good.
No.
That's pretty good.
I
3
did a representative sample and went through and yellow lined a lot of it, but I didn't read every one of them, no.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, there are 2,000 of them for crying.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's hard. But they're all worth, noting. I thought that it would be good for us, rather than to just kind of do a kind of a round robin as to what our initial observations or perceptions or opinions of what we saw would be worth doing. And can we start with you, Jeff? Or,
I'm gonna pull up my notes, so if you come back to me while I pull this up.
Okay. Alex, do you want
Okay, sure. Let's see. Well, one thing I wanted to say is that in every case, even if there were, a smaller percentage of people that were against something, I still read all of their comments objectively because I feel like there was still value in some of what they were saying. While
Sure.
they may be a minority, I think it's important to still kind of hear some of these voices. And so I also went through the comments and I kind of highlighted key pieces of text to find patterns or just to prompt me to see, what the issues were, and took notes and things like that.
No, well,
And then there's also a lot of overlap between, people that said yes or no. If you parse their comments, sometimes they were confused by the question and they were really saying the opposite of what they meant, or they would qualify it. And if they'd said no, they'd qualify it with a yes, effectively. And so there were a lot of cases where, like with the second question, and I know you guys all saw my stuff, or the first question, I took people that said they were not satisfied with the building trend, and then I tracked their responses to each of the particular options available and looked at that. Same thing on question 2. If people said that they didn't want us to change anything in the code, did they then answer yes later? And there were quite a few of people that did say, but I do want this. And so I tracked all of that. Or if they said, yes, they want code changes. Oh, I think I already said that. You know, and then there's some clear things about, you know, it looks like maybe the maximum height is fine, but there's a lot of opportunities to address that with different methods that people have talked about as well. One thing that came up a number of times is that I felt like people thought that we just aren't enforcing our rules, and they don't realize that the rules actually allow these things. Like the things that are being built are to code. And so a lot of people have the misconception that, you know, that we're just being lax and letting this stuff slip through, but that's not the case. So I think that there's some education there. So that's just kind of my synopsis. I think there's some things that we can cross off the list. Maybe I think there's some things like, and we can discuss this in length, but, you know, perhaps like with the dark sky or the lighting ordinance, maybe that comes down to a set of recommendations and not code, you know, just trying to hear what people are saying and what makes the most sense. And the umbrella of all of this is to make it simpler, not harder. And so that's, without trying to dive too deeply into any of this.
It's good.
Okay.
It's good. Good start. Brian?
I came away with several, well, I didn't read every comment. I did the same thing that Alex did. I went through and focused on the pros and the cons and the content and red line or yellow lined a bunch of things. And tried to find the consistencies there. I was struck a little bit by the focus on I want to maximize the value of my house, which I can understand, but nobody said, and that results in higher taxes every year. Nobody had the economics there. And that, though, gets back to a philosophical conversation that I've had in this room many times over the last 30 years, which is the question of I want to do anything I want and maximize my value versus we're living 25 feet from each other. And if the attitude about I can do anything I want, I mean, I'm a libertarian basically, all right? But I'm a realistic libertarian in the sense that when we are living in an urban environment, we cannot go around swinging our arms anywhere we want because we're going to hit somebody in the nose. You know, there has to be a balance here, and I didn't see in some comments that an appreciation for that. And the other thing that sort of got to me was that I noted was the emphasis on increasing value of homes as being a primary function, and this reflects my own value. I value this community, the community of the people here more than the opportunity. Yes, I've made money on my house, probably. I've been there 38 years, so it's probably increased in value. Great. I've noticed an increase in the taxes, though, too. There were some comments about, well, this is even worse than the city of Austin. That is absolute ignorance. I'm in the real estate business. Those people have no idea what the city of Austin puts you through, and that's just ignorance. The age of the responders was young, and it bothers me, frankly, that Jeff's probably the youngest man on the youngest person here, and we may not be representative in the sense of our own
Well, it's across
ages.
the board. It looks pretty even.
This
Perhaps,
committee's not very diverse.
Oh, but this
maybe I'm
committee's
feeling my age or something.
Yeah, no, I think that's what
I have noticed, and I think it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Well, just to clarify, 18 to 34, there were 3 responders. 35 to 49, there were 106. 50 to 64, there were 90. And 64 and above were 63. So the bulk was 35 to 49, followed by 50 to 64.
Yeah.
That's younger than me.
Okay.
Maybe that's my view, but
Yeah.
when we moved here in 1983, we were with 4 little children. We were the young people in the neighborhood,
Mhm.
and there weren't a whole lot of kids here. And we went through a period where we had an increased number of kids, and then a period where we had a fewer, and we're back to the point where I think we have more kids in the neighborhood today than we've ever had.
Oh.
And I think that's a joyous
Uh-huh.
thing.
Yeah.
I live near the park, and some people would gripe about hearing the noise from the swim team and the guns going off, or not you think they use a horn now instead of a gun. I think that's great. And the sound of bats hitting Little League balls and things like that, that's not noise pollution. That's our own children growing up in a healthy environment, for crying out loud. So I'm glad to see the younger generation here. But I think they have a little bit different attitude about the community than I do, perhaps, and I just wanted to throw that out as something that I noted in the comment.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then,
Brian, I bet that younger group though, you say it might be a different attitude, but I bet it's still pretty diverse. You know, between yes and no.
probably so.
I think it is.
Probably
Yeah.
so.
Figure that out.
Yeah.
You can check right in.
Well, and of the people that have built a home and lived in Rollingwood for less than 5 years, the bulk of them said they would like to see code changes.
Hmm.
So there's a higher
Interesting.
percentage.
Say that again.
So of people that have built homes and have lived in Rollingwood for less than 5 years, more of them would like to see changes to the code.
Oh, interesting.
So,
That's interesting. My last comment was the response to the Florida area ratio question, and I was disappointed that did not get a strong affirmation,
Mhm.
because I think that's the mechanism by which we can try to deal with. We did see a lot of comments about some houses are too big. And the Florida area ratio is the primary tool to address that problem. And I don't think that's another, like you mentioned, something's an education issue, and I think that's
well, there
to
is.
some degree an education issue.
I took the people that said no to FAR, and then I looked to see what they said about changing the reference datum, impervious cover, tenting, setback, development restrictions, if the setback sizes are too small or large, and upper floor restrictions. And there was quite a number of people that said they'd like to see us change the reference datum and address tenting and setback development restrictions. So I think that even though they say
But
no
even
to
though they said no to FAR.
FAR, I think all of these other things can help mitigate that. And I think people are afraid of impervious cover and FAR. But anyway, remains to be seen how you can.
Yeah,
Use
okay.
these.
And those, and then on the impervious cover question, there is there's, I think, confusion in the answers and confusion in the law, and that some of the impervious cover issues are not city issues. The questions about drainage and when you have to start collecting and dealing with the rainwater off your roof and things like that are at the state level. Now, they're of interest here to us about flooding, and so we have overlapping issues, but right now, for the most part, the legal issues involved have to do with state law.
And that's part of our own local ordinance.
But we do have our own.
We do have our own.
Yeah.
We do have our own, but the, having recently done an addition and having to wrestle with this, most of what I had to wrestle with was either Edwards Aquifer or state.
There was one particularly good comment that was made in that section that had to say that the TCEQ was primarily concerned with polluting your neighbor, having sediment run over into someone else's space, versus having a discharge of water that was greater than it had been prior to the building, which is where our code comes into play. I thought the person who had written it had done it very well, and I highlighted it as something that we ought to be looking at someday. But
the discharge of pollutants is also a federal issue, under the Clean Water Act, and gets you into, it's called the Section 402 program, if anyone really wants to go read the statute and the regulations. And we don't really end up with that here very much, because the federal regulations only kick in if you're disturbing a full acre of property, and very few of the homes here are big enough to have approached that. But these intertwined issues of discharges too much, discharges in the wrong place, you built a house and your water, or your roof is now running through my living room. We had one comment like that, that I saw.
We did.
Those are all interrelated, and impervious cover, and those are all interrelated environmental meaning what happens out there to the rainwater. Those are all interrelated issues. And whether they're federal, state, or local, the local is the smaller jurisdiction that can deal with some of that, I think.
Good.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
through.
Good. Jay?
So I think you were asking for general impressions
Yeah.
of the survey results, so that's what I'll try to give you. It's all driven by the first two questions. The first one, there's really a 50-50 split on people being satisfied or dissatisfied with new construction. The people that are not dissatisfied still raise issues with a house about height or mass. So I think, and maybe it's the house next door to them, but I think there are more people dissatisfied with one aspect of the new construction than are not. I think there's a very strong interest in updating the codes. Even in the no's, they would say in their comments that they wanted a limitation on height. So if you add those into the yeses, you get close to 80% say they want changes in the code.
Alex made that point.
In terms of the height, most people think 35 feet is height, but it all has to do with the details of how the height is determined.
Devil's in the details.
And enforcement. I also saw several comments about people thinking that they're not being enforced. The height limitations are not being enforced, or the setbacks are not being enforced. And I take it that's not so, but there's that impression that they're not being enforced. In terms of the height limitations, there seemed a very strong preference for scenario 3, but just talking to an architect friend of mine saying that I'm not sure people really understood how restrictive that is, and that it'd be very difficult to build houses on sloped lots in that scenario. So, but that is the preference that people chose. There wasn't really a lot of strong interest in flat versus sloped or interest in FAR. Setbacks were considered to be okay if enforced. Projection limits are about right, the projections into the setback. But then 60% of people said that they wanted some limits on the setback. So I'm not sure how those come across.
I think that there might have been a little confusion there, in that the city council just a few months ago did a redo of what is allowed in setbacks, and if my memory is correct.
No, it's stipulated in the survey.
We had provisions that didn't have limitations on how roof overhangs and other things could go into setbacks, and we put some limitations on how far a bay window could go out, how far a roof overhang could go out, those kind of things. And so we really have two different ordinances, and I don't know whether people were appreciative of that fact.
Well, we did put it in the note. We did put it in the survey that this had happened.
That's
There was
right.
a recent change that put limitations on what you could do that didn't exist prior.
One of our
That's one.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the question, I read the answers to say that they were happy with the setback rules as changed. Not as they had
Both
been.
ways, actually.
Not as they had been in the past.
Well, I wonder, looking at the comments, whether some of the interest in other setback restrictions has to do with pools and pool decks and things
Yeah.
like that, rather than projections from the house.
Yeah.
It seemed to be some interest in tenting, but not strong. I mean, almost, 55 to 42. There's not a interest in limiting stories per se, number of
No.
stories. Not much interest in limiting the area above certain levels.
That's related to the tenting. So that's consistent with the fact that people didn't want the tenting, because that's part of the same concept of forcing.
I saw pretty strong interest in allowing circular driveways that connect between two streets. Some interest in exploring dark sky, but it was kind of mixed with also just some limitation on exterior and landscape lighting. People not wanting security lights to shine into their windows. So that needs to be teased out somehow. I mean, I think it's true that making Rollingwood a true dark sky community is
That ain't gonna
probably
happen.
long gone.
Yeah.
The chance for that is long gone.
Not in the middle of Austin.
But,
We're too close to downtown.
but in the comments, I think there was pretty strong wanting to have some limitations on outdoor lighting.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I guess the question in my mind, I've never had to wrestle with this. Does that basically mean force the direction of lighting down
That's some of it.
Generally,
I mean, that's a solution.
instead of being careful about getting it up and into the eyes of?
You can change bulbs, you can have shielded light source. So, for instance, there's a lot of exterior decorative lights that are unshielded but can cast into somebody's home, maybe from the backyard or something. And then there's a lot of security lights that can shine. I also think addressing street lighting, because this was something that's come up over time. They've
We
changed
really
that.
don't have many streetlights in the
Brian?
Yes, Tom?
So my impression was that's an open book still. I mean, it has to be addressed maybe.
I think
separately.
that just to
Tom wants to say
Oh, yeah.
something.
Yeah.
What's up? Tom?
Brian, we spent a great deal of time on commercial lighting on BK's Road, and our survey results had a very strong, which is what you would expect, impact on our residents that lived along adjacent to the commercial areas about how they handle the lighting on that. And we've spent a great deal of time on working with the lighting on the modification of our code for the commercial lighting. And a lot of that doesn't, will have some applications, I think, in the residential area as well on that. And again, it's not a dark sky type of deal that you're going to get to, but you are dealing with directional lighting and the bulb type and how it's affecting your neighbors on that.
And I want to just give a brief background on that. Several years ago, the Girl Scouts came and gave a presentation to City Council about dark sky, and so it came to us at P&Z, and we kind of explored that, but P&Z didn't really have an appetite for it. But it's come up, and it's a way of opening the conversation about lighting, because I think we tried to word it very carefully. Like, we don't really think that we're a candidate for a dark sky community, but I think that there's some things in the dark sky recommendations that we were just trying to see what people would say. And it does seem like there is quite a bit of interest in managing some lighting aspects without going
Yes.
so far as to try and do a dark sky.
I like
And that's
what you said,
that's
teased
where I'm-
out the difference
Yeah.
between the dark side, or the dark sky and the neighbors shining lights into each other's,
Yeah.
and, it wasn't really intended to talk about what's going on in neighbors' plots relative to you and how it's impacting you personally, but probably more of the comments were directed that way.
That's right.
And I've just, because we're on that topic, I think it also goes back to kind of Brian's kind of overall philosophy of how we interact as a community with our neighbors. And some of the comments that I saw in the dark sky, like, well, people should buy blackout curtains. That's a troubling comment to me, because I don't think that it is beholden to homeowners to try and mitigate somebody else's impacts. I know I've spent thousands of dollars on planting material, watering it to have it freeze and die, and you lose your privacy in an effort to protect yourself from things that are kind of a simple fix, that as a community we should maybe be more mindful of those impacts.
Here,
So,
here.
okay.
I'm going to
Jay?
finish up my part. Trees obviously have a very high priority. I mean, 5s and 4s is 74%. But it's interesting when you, as far as the current code goes, 57% said it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
43% said
I
it
thought that was
wasn't.
Didn't know there
interesting.
was a problem.
But then in the comments, you see comments about enforcement again, and I don't know whether that's a real problem or not. But that's what people are saying, is that the tree ordinance is okay as is, but it's not being enforced. Builders are, killing off trees after the project's done without recourse. And, this is just from the comments, so.
Well, and
but-
even of the yes comments, if they say, is it doing enough, they'll say, under yes, I don't know, don't know. I don't have any, no, not sure. So again, you have to kind of read the fine print.
There's obviously very strong sentiment for making changes in our tree ordinance.
Where do we think we would put trees? There was a very high agreement we need to find a way to put more trees in public areas.
Mm-hmm.
What public areas do we have out in the park?
Well, they're talking about the
Well,
right of way in front of
right-of-way.
your house.
It would be
To shade
planting in the right of way.
streets potentially.
Yeah.
Then we also have problems with the trucks knocking down trees, knocking down limbs
Okay.
on.
Well, then we have a problem with that, but we just
We've got-
still have it.
Brian?
Hey,
Seems to me we want impossible things here.
Oh, I don't know.
Brian, you may recall that at one time Rollingwood did have trees that were in islands on the middle of Rollingwood Drive.
Wow.
And they got hit so often that they died, but we ended up taking them out on that, especially lower Rollingwood Drive.
I don't think, do we have any esplanades in this city at all?
They took them out. We did have some.
We do have some circles, with trees in the center, cul-de-sacs, with trees in the center of the cul-de-sac.
Randall.
We do?
We happen to live in one, that's right. I
Yeah.
happen,
Randolph
my
Park.
street has one.
All right, I don't,
There are
I
others
don't come
too.
by and watch your house very
You,
often.
you,
but
you,
to go
that's
down there.
right, you're not doing it enough.
Right by the Gleeks.
Yeah, but there are some other, there are a couple other cul-de-sacs that
Okay.
way.
Well, if we've got cul-de-sacs and they're not getting in the way of the normal flow of traffic, I'm for all planting trees everywhere we can.
They're not well
particularly in the
cared for
park.
trees, but they are there, they are
Okay.
there.
Dave, I'm going to pass on to the next person. with this
Okay, very good. Duke, you wanna?
Oh, you're not going?
I will go,
Okay.
but,
Well, I mean, everything I would have to say has been said, but, here's the deal. For me, the devil is in the details, because as Jay might mention, nobody's interested in differentiating between flat roofs and sloped roofs, no setbacks. But at the same time, what we do along those edges, I think is very important. And, you say, I kind of felt a little bit different about the tinting, that there might have been enough of a differential, whatever it was, 13 percentage points, that it's enough for a strong consideration to think about, okay, how do we treat those edges? Because, I can't tell you how many times I've read the word privacy. And that might not create more privacy, but it might give a sensation or feeling of a little bit of isolation or not this proportional, overwhelming feeling. And again, you know, FAR, I think that's an important tool myself, but it looks like a 50-50 breakdown on that. But hey, you know, heights, roof edges, exposed foundations. I think we need to come to grips with, that wasn't the question we asked, but there were enough comments for me to go, okay, yeah. And I mean, I felt that way all along.
Yeah, I
You know,
agree with you on that.
The whole business of the application of the codes and ordinances, you know, this business is about, I mean, I don't know, very early on, somebody told, or there was a description of how the new adopted international code says that a certain datum is one thing, our code says another, and basically people are, I use the word gaming, you know, taking advantage of the system. We need to clean that up, you know. So
Our code, and as a lawyer reading it, it is an accretion of changes here and there over many years. And it is not at all internally consistent, and it's got places that need to be coordinated, but that's just a drafting comment rather than one of substance. But that's how things come into conflict in writing documents, whether they're contracts or statutes or ordinances or whatever. Somebody says, oh, we've got a problem here, and we fix that, not realizing the unintended consequence that has in rippling through the documentation. And we've got a collection of that, is our ordinance.
That's why we are comprehensive.
I understand that, but that makes our job a lot harder.
I know.
no, it does, but I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
hey,
right.
I think that's a good thing
Yep.
in reality.
Yep.
But just, you know, the application of that stuff, to me, we can simplify it and make it easier, more discernible. I mean, I said early on, I feel bad because I didn't understand that I could go game the system a little bit better.
Mr. Opportunity.
But no, that's not really how I feel about it.
No.
But, you know, this whole business too about educating people about some of the details of this stuff, because look, the drainage ordinance, you know, I have had conversations with previous city engineers for Rolling Wood, Kenny Watkins in particular, and discuss the validity and just how good is our ordinance. Does it you know what? There's a lot of good substance to it, and that is our impervious coverage control. You know, we need to get that through the heads of everybody that has a big problem with impervious coverage. But again, I just go back and say, hey, the devil's in all the details of this stuff, because to me, I think, you know, building heights are an issue. Everybody likes 35, but how we discern and apply it, that's important. You know, roof edges, foundation, exposure, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want somebody that knows about night, you know, lighting, and Jerry Fleming, one of my good engineer buddies, I mean, we've had to do many commercial projects, especially out in bee caves, that have very strong lighting controls and all that stuff. And mainly that, you know, we're not going to get dark sky, but we can control light pollution, you know.
Just a quick question, what percentage?
I'm sorry to bring you into it, Jerry.
Actually, Jerry is going to be sending us something in the email about that very thing. We had spoken before the meeting,
Right.
and I pointed him to how he can do that. Okay. so-
He's a good guy.
In interpreting this survey, at what percentage do you feel like, if it's 60-40, is that significant, or is it 70-30, or 50-50, but they don't understand the question? I mean,
No,
I've always thought that this is not a democratic process. What this is asking people's opinions on how things are, okay? And there are gonna be some areas in here where we get a hell no. We're not, that's no good, that's a dumb idea. But we're gonna get some that are saying, you know, there's something there, I'm not sure I like it, but you ought to look at it. And that's what we ought to be doing. We ought to be looking at it and seeing whether or not it fits our needs. A lot of the comments that came through were, look to see elsewhere if what you're suggesting works. And then if it does, then maybe you ought to consider it for Rollingwood. And I think, that's what we are getting permission to look at something other than what we have. That's what this is about. Did I say that right?
sounds good. And I mean,
The devil's in
hey,
the details.
Jay, you know, if you want a number, I kind of looked at, hey, if this was like a 12 percentage point difference, then I was going to give it some pretty good consideration. And like I say, it may not be like a drastic, okay, boy, that's a heck yeah, we're going to do that. But we might work around the edges there and come up with some improvements, you know.
I thought the comment part of that was more inclusive to me than the percentages as to what,
Yeah.
how I looked at that, frankly.
Tom, you want to go next?
Be glad to. We've already talked the lighting deal, so I'm not going to go over that again. I had a few notes on that. The issues from the macro type of view on this is, it was interesting to me that the number of comments that I read that had, you know, we kind of like the new homes being built generally, but there are a few that are really bad that are causing a problem on that. And I think that's a telling deal. I'm kind of on Brian's side when it comes to the libertarian view of how government should be done. But when you have a few, that just makes it a very difficult thing to for a city like Rollingwood to how we handle that. And you don't want to punish a majority just for a few on that, but it's a problem. I was a little surprised on the heritage tree analysis, because if you took the percentage and then if you took the comments, there were a number of comments about big trees and the trees being cleared off of lots on that. So that was kind of a difference that I haven't really been able to go in and look at that again. I need to kind of get a better feel for what was being said, but the percentages surprised me on that. The drainage part, you know, that's tied in to a lot of things. And yes, and Brian, you did a good analysis of our responsibility, the state's responsibility, and the EPA. Actually, some of the responsibility that TCQ is imposing and the Barton Springs district is imposing has some originated at the EPA when they took over, when the state of Texas took over some of the EPA's deals. So that gets to be a really complicated deal as to how that comes back. I thought, and we've talked about this a little bit, I thought the setbacks were the fact that we included the notification that the setbacks have been changed. I think that's why the setbacks people were happy with. I think if it hadn't been changed, I think you would have gotten a much different type of analysis on that. So good job, City Council. I think y'all did a good job with that one. Let's see, the other thing I had on heights, I was really kind of surprised, and I'm not sure if that's education or not, about having the same height restriction on a sloped roof versus a flat roof and the impact that that would have on how we would look at buildings on that. But it is what it is that came out on that. Option 3 is obviously the preferred sample that people preferred on that. And I think that was my notes that I had on there, David, but
Okay. Jeff, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thanks for holding up.
I'm sorry.
So overall, outstanding job by the community. I thought this is a golden data set. I thought it was incredible. Outstanding job by CRC, especially Dave and Alex for putting together the survey questions. And great job by Bowie, authenticating. I think it was just amazing teamwork all around. And Alex, thanks for all the help with interpreting results. Fantastic work there. I did notice, Dave, I haven't done the analysis, but comparing this to the emails, I think it's a little bit different from what we initially saw. Like, we thought there was something there, and then when you brought in the data set to include the entire community, it's not as extreme as some of the email responses. So I think we can go back and compare, but to answer your question from earlier, this is more representative than the emails, and this is, to me, the best we're gonna get. Like, this is awesome. We're not, I think you're asking the question around polling, we're not gonna then go and give a vote later on. This isn't a prediction of a later vote. Like, this is the data that we have. And it's up to us in terms of how we wanna interpret the data. And I love that we have the comments, because there's some, to me, when I read the comments, I realized, oh man, this question might have been a little bit of a miss in terms of the way we asked it, because we did such good education throughout. I think question 5 with the max height, I think was a bit of a miss. There wasn't education on that. Sorry,
Flat versus
the flat
pitched.
versus
Yeah,
pitched. Yeah, whichever question that was, you can read the comments and realize that not everyone understood the question. So I don't think you can take the numbers purely based on the numbers, but I think it is a pretty good indication, especially when you read the comments. And Alex has done fantastic work around that. The big thing that I think we're gonna have to decide is, how do you interpret a majority? Like, what if something is 51%, 52%? It's not unanimous. It's not going to be easy. But if you say, well, this isn't enough, but then you actually have the majority of respondents that you're turning your back on. So is that really the right answer either? So I think maybe when it's something split 50-50, you find compromise. You find something in the middle. Like for FAR, for example, some folks said, I don't like this because I don't want to be like Austin. Here's some examples of how FAR was misapplied in Austin. There's some easy ways to take the edge off of that. You can only apply it to lots over a certain size, and there's no lots in Austin that are the same size, or most lots in Austin that are talking about in their comments that they're complaining about are smaller lots in Austin where FAR is applied to. So I agree with the sentiment from the comment, but I think that you can distinguish what we actually recommend from what the negative comments are about if we want to go down that path. I think it's a little early to make that decision now, but I think there's ways that we can interpret the results, and I think that's really what we as a group will have to debate, and that's where, like Duke said, the devil's in the details. I love that we have the comments. I noticed that if we ever give the option for about right, that always wins. I don't know how to interpret that. It's just because people say they want, a lot of people say they want change, but then you give about right, and they're like, no, actually, I like that better. So I just thought that was interesting. I do have numbers. Duke brought up earlier on the demographics in terms of the answer to should we consider changes to the code. So 35 to 49 was 55% yes, 50 to 64 was 78% yes, and over 64 was 83% yes. So there is a bit of a demographic split there.
How about that?
That's all I got.
Okay, good. You know, on that point, I thought it was interesting. There were a number of comments there that suggested that the more mature crowd here in Rowan were going to hold back any kind of change. That they'd be the ones who were in the way of things because they're set in their ways, or they like the roadhouse and they don't want to tear it down or whatever. And I saw that comment a number of times in a number of different places. That I thought was surprised me.
Now, if I understood Jeff, though, it's us old fogies
Isn't
who
it?
are actually most interested in changing.
That's right.
I think changing the code versus changing the neighborhood are two different things, right?
Yeah.
So it's how you interpret change.
So,
I like your way of using senior or experienced instead of old fogey, but I'm an old fogey.
I'm doing my best.
Hey,
In my advanced years, I'm doing what I can. So,
of the eldest of us on this committee, we're all in new houses except you.
that's right.
That's interesting.
What now?
That's true. We all have new houses. You're the only one in this group that doesn't have a newer house.
I've got the
Oh,
oldest.
that's right. I'm sorry, Tom. Gee, Tom,
Yes.
you're not sitting here. It's hard to
You're-
tell.
I did
We're
just
putting
go
you in the
through-
younger crowd.
I just did go through getting a building permit and doing a significant remodel and adding 250 square feet.
All right.
So
Yeah, it
Okay.
counts. That
You're in
counts.
that
I'm not
crowd.
living in the past entirely.
All right. Okay. Some of the things that I noticed were that I don't think I saw the word nonconformance in any of the comments anywhere.
I
There
think I
was
saw
an
it, like,
allusion, there was
once.
alluding to it, that some folks ought to, if there are changes made, then the older owners ought to be somehow grandfathered in, so that they can take advantage of the old ways if the changes are more restrictive. But there was nobody actually saying nonconformance, which seems to be a thing that comes up an awful lot, but it didn't come up once here. I thought that it was really interesting that folks said that, that they were happy with the way things are, and then they would put, they would say, okay, yes, I'm happy with the way things are, except for the size of houses that we're seeing right now. And the size of houses, I think, was probably the biggest thing that we'd seen most of. You know, there were probably more comments throughout the entire survey having to do with the bulk of housing as opposed to anything else. I thought it was interesting when you got into setbacks, how there were a couple of things I noticed. One was there seemed to be some appetite for changing setbacks on corner lots because
That was interesting, that came up a
yeah,
lot.
because corner lots have the same side setback as a front setback, and that means that they give up a lot of space. So there was a suggestion that maybe you ought to shrink that setback on corner lots. The other thing, and I thought this was even more interesting, some people were saying our front setbacks are too large and that we ought to give up some front and give back some back. I never even thought about that before, and I thought, yeah, that's an interesting.
That one struck me
And there
too.
were a number of those. It wasn't just one person. It was probably 10
Okay,
people.
somebody
I
who
bet said
made that comment was trying to do what? They want more
They
private
want-
space in the back?
That's right. I think some of the arguments were, I'm losing privacy. If I have more backyard, I can gain some of it back. I don't know how that happens, but you could, okay? Also, that, the houses are so big that I should just have a bigger backyard, and I don't need all the front yard. And then there was the argument that, all we're doing is watering our front lawns, we're putting a bunch of water on there. It's nice to look at and all that, but it doesn't really do me as a resident any good.
Yeah.
If I could get some more value out of the property that I've got, it would be in the back, not in the front. So, and there were, like I said, I'll bet at least 10 comments, probably more.
Yeah, I made note of those. I thought
yeah.
that was interesting too.
And of course, the how it's measured, that really got the right amount. I think we did a good job of describing the situation in the way that it is and what the different alternatives might be for how height should be or could be measured, and then gave a clear choice that really did gravitate to one thing. And I think the magic phrase in all that is, this would not enable a 45-foot wall. So there were 3 choices. 2 of them said, yes, you could still get to a 45-foot wall with this selection. But on the third choice, you couldn't get there, and you can't. So I thought that was interesting. That might have been as much a statement about 45-foot walls as it is about the way that you do this measurement. Now, the way that looks, and the sloping and all that, that's going to be if we're going to go that way, it's going to be a tough slug. It's going to be hard. What else? Going back to the light, it did seem like there was a lot more concern about neighbors shining lights onto your property than about trying to be a good citizen of the universe. You know, it was more about, you know, like, these lights are coming at me, or people have motion detectors and they turn a light on that comes in my bedroom window, and we saw quite a bit of that. I thought it was pretty interesting that question number 26, where you just kind of allowed to riff on whatever you thought was happening. That was actually one of the more highly answered, more commented questions.
Which one was that? Just
With the, you know,
refresh
the
it.
end, at the very end, do you have any other comments or things that you're particularly concerned about?
Did we get the
At the very end of the survey.
Did we get
We
those
did.
comments in one of these?
We have the you have them, they're there.
I don't, was that, what
It
concerns
was
did
after
you-
the discussions about whether or not you had gotten enough notification with regard to a building permit, and.
So what concerns did you have or issues were important to you as a nearby neighbor? I think that's the last
Yeah.
question.
It was an open-ended question. It didn't have a yes/no answer on it.
Okay.
It was only, here, I'll get there. Hold on, I'll tell you in a second.
I either didn't have those or didn't run them out.
I didn't see those, I don't believe.
There were,
So it's just open comments.
there were 175
Yeah,
answers to
we'll talk
it.
about that.
I maybe haven't read
167. It's the question number 26, which is,
What concerns did you
what
have?
concerns did you have and/or what issues were important to you as a nearby neighbor?
Got it.
And it was just open-ended. It wasn't a yes or no. And so people
Do you have?
got
those?
it out.
I
Yeah.
have that, yeah, I don't think I actually went through all these.
And, you know, they talk about porta pots and
Yeah.
things, you know, awful lot of comments about nails and tires and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, and contractors parking on the street and making you slalom down your own street.
Right. Yeah, I heard an awful lot of people saying that it'd be great if we got contractors to park on one side versus both sides of the street.
Or
There were
park
a
in front
number
of the
those.
project they're working on and not the house across the street.
Yeah, there's that
When
too.
there's space, like,
Yeah.
you see that
So
all the time.
people, it was funny, in that part of the survey, people said that in general, yeah, they were notified, okay, and yeah, it's okay, and yeah, you know, you gotta expect that. But, you know, in this question, they dumped out, you know, it was like, okay, yeah, that's okay, but this is what I really think. And, we ought
It's
to be looking at that.
This is
golden for city
interesting.
council.
Yeah,
Just lots of
that's all.
random things.
Yeah, those are
that-
things that need to go actually to, I think, city council or
Yeah.
to staff to remedy. I think that's all I want to talk about, I think. Just some things that I noticed. I'm really delighted that nonconformists didn't come up. So, here we are. We're at the end of that discussion, I think. It becomes, we turn this into kind of a next steps discussion as to what we think, where do we think we want to go with this. To me, we've got so much here that I don't know that if we can take it as an entire group here and say, okay, let's all work on all these things, you know. We had some weeks ago gone through and put together a listing of things that we're most interested in working on. And that might be a way to be able to break the responses up so that we can start visiting on them as individual subgroups to start coming up with some way forward on these things. Some of them are really complicated. Some of them are really easy. I think what I saw with the driveway thing, it surprised me how much support there was for changing the driveways.
And maybe fencing
That
might be an easy one.
fences
Zoning,
and,
districts.
and we certainly got a lot of support for planting trees or coming up with some means of the city having an effort to get more trees out into the right-of-ways and so on. So there are some, I think, easy things to work on here, but almost all of it's hard.
Well, and also, again, what is our task? So if we look at fencing, for instance, a lot of people said basically 8 foot. If I were just to generalize, it seemed like fairly common. Anything more, you know, you might need permission from your neighbor, or at least have a conversation with your neighbor, just as like that seemed to come up a lot. And anything above 8 feet would have to be some sort of, you know, mesh or wires or green screening or something that's not solid. But I don't know. To me, it seems like we could all have a conversation, make a quick summary, pass that along. Because I don't think it's up to us to decide, you know, we think it should be 8 feet. This is what we're hearing is 8 feet. But I don't know. What y'all think about that?
You mean actually having a recommendation come out of this group tonight?
No, not
Oh,
tonight.
okay.
No, but I'm saying instead of us
Yeah.
breaking up into these subgroups, which
Yeah.
I think is complicated, and I really like hearing everybody's input on this. I think it's incredibly valuable, but I also think that we need to be mindful of how much time are we really going to spend on these when it's just going to be passed to P&Z and council to go through the whole thing again.
There's a city council meeting tomorrow evening, and I'm planning to go to it. And I expect that I'll be getting up at the podium and kind of talking a little bit about what Megan had done, you know, about what the mechanics were, and about how many surveys we collected, what they kind of look like without getting too much into the details of what we're learning. But one of the things that I think needs to be discussed and we need to get from city council is to what they think that the deliverables look like. What is it? You know, what is the level of detail that we're supposed to turn over to them? Are we supposed to give them, you know, something that's, you know, pretty tied up with a nice bow? Or is it more or less a set of ideas that we think that needs to be pushed forward by other committees or commissions or whatever? And I think we're gonna be asked for more detail, but I will suggest it.
Well, if you guys are interested, like, we could take fencing right now because it's there's not a lot to it. One of the things that came up a lot was regarding privacy. And another thing that I hadn't considered that people mentioned is that really tall fences start to kill people's landscaping. They block light. And so, you know, some people said, no, there shouldn't be a limitation, but maybe there should be a limitation because at some point that does seem like, but if your neighbor gives you permission, is that okay? So I think that we could itemize what we're hearing about fencing, distill it down to, you know, a few bullet points and pass that along. It's just a suggestion. I don't know what y'all think about. And do that for each question.
But in our effort to kick around each of these topics, each of these issues, to me, we have to start with the bullet points, you know, the general outline, throwing down those parameters, and then, you know, if we evolve into more detail and gives a better application, great. But we got to start. We got to start with the
bullet
big
point.
picture and
Okay, whittle it
Yeah.
down.
yeah.
So how would we go about doing that within the scope of 2 hours? How do we do that?
Can we do it also through email? Can we each, you know, what are limitations on?
I think what
making
could
bullet
happen,
points?
I think to your question, to answer your question, I think y'all could send me your ideas of bullet points, and I could collect them, and I could send them back out to everybody. I think I'd be allowed to do that,
Okay,
okay? And then we could have that to discuss next time.
that's a
Is
good
that-
idea. Yeah.
How's that feel?
Good.
Good.
Right. By bullet points, you mean what things in the survey we think are actionable based on the results of the survey?
Maybe even your opinion as to how they should be actioned.
Yeah, for instance, on reference data. Like, I think a lot of people were gravitating towards, was it 1 or number 2 or number 3? But to me, I think it's actually a combination, because I think that you can, if you're looking at the slope and you're taking an average, well, don't you want to take the average of the other side as well? Like, it seems unreasonable just to take the slope of one side. So at that point, you're sort of getting multiple points, which is number 2, but then you don't want the entire thing to exceed 35 feet. So sort of magically, it kind of, maybe all 3 have some bearing on this. It's not just 1, 2, or 3.
Well, you know, okay, we jump to another subject. Are you suggesting that we ought to look at all the subjects and come up with bullet points, or should we select maybe 3 or 4 that we could go home and work on and then bring back?
I think we should do as many as we're able to do, and even if one of them is to say, I don't see anything here, that's your only bullet point.
Okay.
I don't know. What do y'all
How
think?
are we with that?
Should we break this, well, okay, you can look at this as either subcommittees working on a particular question, or if we're gonna do this as a committee of the whole, we can't do all 26 questions as a committee of the whole without sitting here through many evenings just like this one.
Exactly.
So are you allowed to take the survey and split it in half and give half to one half of the CRC and the other half to the other half of the CRC to then come back to the broader group with our
Well, at least
recommendations?
That might
Is that
be-
an option?
That's
That
a
might,
good
it'll shrink the bite down,
Yeah.
yes, the mouthful. So,
And again, I mean, hey, Alex said some are gonna be easy,
yeah,
Mhm.
maybe half of it's difficult, maybe half of it's, I don't really know. But some of it's gonna be easy, some of it's gonna be hard. And I think if it's just a first blush, kinda like we went around tonight and did that with all the determined topics. I don't know if it's all necessarily all the questions. There may be some questions that wrap around one topic.
I mean, it's really up to the construction. I mean, if you built a house recently, it's 18 questions or something like that, or 20 questions. And if we're just asked to give, yes, I think there's something to do with this one, but no, leave this alone.
yeah,
I think we can all do 20 questions that way,
okay.
bullet points.
I agree with you.
Okay, but that, and I'm with you, that, you know, the back part of this needs to fall off and go, I think, the city staff and city council. That's just, you know, it's all interesting and stuff, fun to talk about, but I don't really think that's our charge to work on any of that stuff.
Yeah, I've probably already bullet pointed at least half the survey.
Yeah.
You know, I can clean it up and send it to you. I think it would be good for all of us to review everybody's.
Yeah,
'Cause
what I know we can't do is vote on any of it outside of this room.
No,
You know, we
Yeah.
can't,
no, we bring
Yeah.
it
Is she
back.
allowed
for
to send
conversation.
it to you and then you send it to us? Are we all allowed to send you our bulleted list, what you
I
did,
think we
and
can do,
then
yeah,
you could recirculate it?
yeah, I'm allowed to have email contact with each of you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think once you do that, what's gonna you're gonna be able to tell which items we are in agreement on and which items is gonna take a lot more discussion.
Good point. Good point.
In your presentation to city council, are you gonna present Bowie's summary?
I'm probably gonna put a one-pager out there that just, no, I'm not gonna go through question by question and say this is what the percentages were. But I would like the first 2 slides about what we did, what our responses were, what we are doing here tonight, this evening. Just kind of an overview as to the status of this thing. And the question again, as to what level of detail is expected from us for us to complete our mission.
You don't think it would be a good idea for the city council to at least get a sense of what people's thoughts are on the survey in the community?
I think that's one of the other things that's going to be talked about, I think, is how do we release this raw data to the community? Now, I push back on, I've been asked about this already by a council person. And I had not finished reading through all the comments at that time. And I said, there's no way we're going to let this stuff out until at least I've had a chance to read every comment to make sure that someone's not being pointed at or there's some malicious
I was only
comment.
talking
I wanted to
about
make sure it was
the
safe.
Bowie slide presentation,
But it is safe.
not the
yeah.
comments.
Oh, the Bowie comments?
The Bowie slide
Presentation.
presentation.
Oh,
just
well,
gives-
that's out.
Just gives the questions that we asked and
Is that out to council?
Is that out to council?
It's in the packet for tonight's meeting, so they can look at it anytime they want. It will
Can
be
you-
there forever.
Can you put it in the packet tomorrow night, for tomorrow
It's in
night?
there now.
Oh, no, for tomorrow night it is?
Oh, it's not posted as a topic on the agenda for city council?
There's what, we do have we have something there. It is something about the status and what, yeah, there, would you drop that in there? Yes.
That would be good.
Dave, I'm not sure I completely heard, what is your stance on releasing comments?
I'm getting better with it right now, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't wanna drop the raw data out there.
Yeah.
I wanted to at least have some level of refinement on it, and,
Do you think,
and I wanted comfortable that the comments, in fact, aren't condemning anybody. There are a number,
He didn't say anything
mentions-
about
there
our
are,
chairman, did
there
he?
are actually
no,
a
it didn't say anything about that.
few,
But, huh?
there are some specific addresses
Yes,
and things
on my
called out.
spreadsheet, I highlighted all those in red.
Yeah.
And when I look at them, I said, well, they're not mostly addresses that haven't already been talked about before. It's the same
But
old
sometimes
bunch.
they're
It's
being
the same
talked
old bunch.
about by neighbors, and I don't think that it was completely clear to people that anonymous, not only that are you being shielded with your address, but I think there might have been the interpretation that the comments would be anonymous.
Let me
But-
ask, I don't wanna give anybody this stuff until after tomorrow's city council meeting.
Mhm.
But that could be a question. Are you comfortable with releasing this stuff with addresses on it? And if not, we'll just take them out.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some, and I think that there's a little bit of potential conflict.
Okay.
I agree with Alex, and that we don't need to, that's not something we need to stir the pot on. I think it'd be better to take the addresses out, period, David.
no.
They are out. Nobody.
No.
Oh, in the comments, you
one
mean?
In the
Yeah, yeah.
comments.
No, but
Okay.
Tom, I think we're discussing the raw data set itself.
Ye-
What are your
right.
thoughts on that?
Right.
Yeah, staff has the raw data set right now. And I've asked them not to release it out, or at least not publicize it. But, and there are probably maybe in the entire set, maybe 20, 25 comments that actually mention an address.
Not that many, really.
It,
There's not an exact address, they just say I'm next to the house at such and
Well,
such and such.
yeah, it's a very
and such."
descriptive.
yeah,
Yes.
I think that's the ones that what I was talking about, Jeff. But just the raw data, if you take just the raw data, I think that it's in my opinion, you should give that out, Dave. But I would not give the comments out that have any descriptive deal as to who, as to location.
All right.
I would think that if we put out what we were shown tonight.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's all fine. No, we're talking about, you see, the data belongs to the city, okay? Everything we've received belongs to the city. Now, right now, we kind of have control on that. It's kind of, we're the ones who are the stewards of that for the moment. And the question is, if somebody wants to see all the stuff that we're seeing, what is that?
Yeah, they could make
What
an
is
open
that?
records request and get
Yeah,
it all.
that's right.
but-
Now, right now, we haven't, I've got a spreadsheet, Alex got a spreadsheet, there's several things out there that are in work, but they're not been released to the public, it's only been shared between us, among us. So, is it ready for prime time yet? And maybe it's not. And I think what Tom is saying is that if it's got somebody's address on it, it's not. You gotta pull that stuff out of it.
I'm in complete agreement with that. I'm just worried about, even if we have, I guess, maybe the horse is already out of the barn, with the Bowie presentation tonight, if that's gonna be out there.
Yeah.
But then we're gonna come back and put a different attitude on that because of the things that we see and the things that Alex has pointed out, for example, where somebody said, yes, but
Yeah.
and then we're gonna have to explain the but. And why our recommendation
That's right.
differs from a
Absolutely.
pure 5149,
Yep.
we're gonna go with the 51,
And this is
we
the
probably
reason.
won't in
That's
some
right.
cases.
Because the comments support the 51, or the 49,
Or the
the other way
49.
around, yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
that's
right. Yeah, so, point being that 99% of the comments are ready for prime time, and we should release them. The other 1% that might have an address on it, we can pull that out. We can still release the rest of it.
I think it would also, well, one of the problems is because you can track comments across, you can start to build a profile
Yeah.
of who's saying it. And so I have that concern too, but I mean, I guess it is what it is. It would be nice if you could just,
You know, being able to associate it all with one person, I think is, a singular person, not identify the person, but as a singular being, I think that's perfectly fine.
but I don't think that they filled it out knowing that that was going to happen. Like, we worked very hard to say that this was going to be anonymous, and so I think that there's going to be.
But it is anonymous.
It is and it isn't.
You know that there's a being out there that said these 26 things.
Well,
So
But
what?
you add all those together and it may become
It's-
what Alex.
Dave, what if
point is,
someone
you
says,
add
"My
all those
neighbor-"
together and it may become pretty clear.
Alex,
My next
The,
door neighbor
uh,
at XYZ address, and it's in the comment.
yeah.
Then you can
I-
then
I-
look at that data, then you know everything that person said and who they are, or which house said it. What do you do about that?
But if we
And
take
their
the
age
addresses
and
out, there's no way to track.
Brian.
Their
Needs
age,
to be
if they built a
redacted.
house in the last 5 years, like, you can start to
But
parse.
who does that?
Well,
Well, let's cut to the chase. If I wanted this information, I can get it through the Freedom of Information Act.
right, okay.
It is city data, and we can't, the best we can do, in my opinion, is to remove the references to location and hope that that's satisfactory to everybody.
Yeah.
But Brian, you probably know more about this than I do, but I believe that this is probably open to, the Open Records Act would enable me to go get it if I wanted it.
There's no doubt, Tom, that all of this is subject to the Open Records Act.
Yes.
My issue and my question is, that's fine, that's just a fact of life, but are we better off in how we present this to the council and how we present this to the citizens by being a little bit more cautious about what we hand out when? Yeah, if someone wants to anticipate it and get it and publish it in the Picayune doesn't exist anymore, but whatever, they can do that. We can't control it, but what we can control is how much we put out when, and I'm not sure we're ready to put
Okay.
much out
So,
right now.
so what we have from Bowie is a raw data set that can't be read without parsing it out. You can't just go in there and start looking at it. You gotta pull it apart, okay? Which we did. What we're working with here, what we're looking at right now, are our own products. They are something else. It's a new data set that may or may not include, for instance, addresses. But that's our choice because it's our product. Now, that raw data is still out there and still can be, is still subject to the Freedom of Information Act, but what people are gonna be talking about are our products, what we're talking about.
And when and in what degree of specificity do we get that out to the public is my issue. or my
Well,
question.
if you go back to the comprehensive plan, all of the data from the comprehensive plan is available online right now. You can go out there and read all the comments.
Yeah.
You can do it. They're all there. And I think a slide person could put it all into a singular unit. You could say, this person said this, the same person said this, the same person said that. You can do that with that data set. And nobody seems to have been bothered by any of that. So that's my take on it. No, I don't
It's
care.
It's more work than most people want to do.
My experience, Dave, is that you cannot go wrong by releasing data. When you try to
Yeah.
control the release of data, things go wrong. And I think that's not a good form of government when we do that.
How about if we even take the addresses and we even leave those comments in there, but we X out the addresses? You can have the comment there, but it just X out the address, and, you know, it's up to you to figure out what it is.
You can do that if you put a note that you're doing it just to preserve the confidentiality of the
I think it's
people
great.
making the comment.
Which is the
But you've
reason
got
we're
to
doing
quote
it.
that.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
I suppose.
I know why we're doing it, but I'm,
Who's going to do it? I'm not volunteering.
I'll do it. Why not? I've got most of them in red already on my own spreadsheet.
Oh, okay,
I know
good.
where most of them are.
Cool.
That was the whole point. I had to go through it all to find out whether or not there was anything
Gotcha.
volatile in it.
I appreciate the level of detail you're going through with this. It's great.
yeah, Dave, that's great.
All right. I think, Tom, you can't see me, but I'm turning red. All right. So,
No, I can see you very well.
all right. Okay. So, okay, getting back to where we were. We don't have to release anything tomorrow. We could wait until next meeting and decide to release it. Because I think there's probably some more work that needs to be done on these products anyway. You know, we're probably not necessarily 100% ready to go. Are we?
No,
Are we? No, there's more. There's more to do. There's more to do. You know, we intentionally did not have it posted here tonight because it's really
Yeah.
not ready to go.
I know we're not going to hold a vote on it,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Right. So, what we've decided, I think, now, is that everybody's gonna go back and they're gonna look and they're gonna come up with what they think is bullet points that have to do with the various things, right? This is our homework.
Can we start with what Alex said, and that she's already done, you've already kind of laid down a bunch of bullet points that would help us as a starter?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, yeah, but I think you all should absolutely add to it as well.
Sure.
Edit and, yeah.
It would give us a format to work
Yeah.
with,
Okay,
you know.
yeah.
I like it as a starting point.
I just thought that's kind of what you said earlier, that
Yeah.
you'd already, you know, I've got some stuff that already helps in terms of format or
Well, and
organization.
even what you guys all kind of read also, I think it's good. Just
Yeah.
to start putting all that in there, for sure.
Well,
I got
can-
those notes and everybody
can
else's.
you break off a piece of what you've got specifically for this purpose,
Uh-huh,
okay? And that will be a new product,
okay.
okay? So now we've got a little more granularity on what the deliverables are, okay? So would you do that?
Yeah.
And then ship it to me and then I'll ship it out.
Do you guys have a preferred format? Do you want it in the Excel, or do you just want like a kind of a Word notes
Excel.
document?
Excel,
Okay. Got it.
that's the easiest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit to clean up
I
my-
struggle with Word.
Yeah, okay.
I struggle with Excel, but that's okay.
Well, I have it. I just use my notes program to do the bullet points. So yeah, I can just throw that in there.
If anybody has a problem,
I
if you
could do
truly
both.
do struggle with Excel, put them in an email, send them to me.
That's fine.
And
How's
I
that?
can also
Okay?
send the notes
Okay.
document, so
Okay.
but I don't want to have to keep updating.
I have grandchildren. I can get any program to work.
Isn't that the
I
truth?
do too, but they're not here in town, Tom.
Well, you can borrow one of mine.
Okay. All right.
Tom, that is so funny. I mean, my wife gave her phone to one of the grandkids and said, "Hey, can you do this?"
Yeah.
In 3 seconds, he had done it.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
like 3 years old, right?
Okay.
Well,
Maybe
this one
9,
was
but,
16.
Okay.
Is there anything more to talk about on this discussion of possible action on CRCRC survey status, results, and next steps? We're kind of at a next step right now. We can run with that. And then next meeting, we'll talk it out a bit, and then we'll figure out what we're doing from there. How's that? We good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Well, Alex, I'd like to thank you for the analysis that I saw that Dave sent me on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
Very much.
Glad it was helpful.
Okay.
It was for me.
Now, the discussion, I'll move on to item number 4, the regular agenda, discussion and possible action to formalize the trees subcommittee. Is that where we want to be right now?
I don't
No.
think so.
I don't think it is
I
where we
think
wanna
it's a
be.
bullet point.
Yes.
It's a bullet point, okay.
Move to,
Move.
table item number 4.
Table, okay, that sounds good to me. Or do we need to vote on that?
I'll second it if you were gonna vote on it.
Okay. Okay, it's done. All right. And regular agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on future meeting dates and agenda topics for discussion.
You have a motion on the table, it was seconded, now you do need to take a vote.
Okay. Well, all in favor of tabling to
Item 4.
formalize the tree subcommittee, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, Desiree. All right, final action item here is discussion and possible action on future meeting dates and agenda topics for discussion. I think we got that covered already. I will not be present here in this room for the next meeting,
Which is when?
which is November 28th. Alex, you gonna be here?
I will be here.
Okay, so then I'm gonna ask you to chair that meeting,
Okay.
all right?
As far as I know, I should be here.
And I will do my best to zoom in,
Okay.
okay? And you should have you'll have a boatload of stuff to work with. I'll be able to work on it probably now and then, so, okay? All right, I think we've covered everything. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, second? Okay, second, good. Okay, all in
Unanimously
favor,
seconded.
okay? Aye, okay.
Vote with your feet.
We're adjourned. It
Good night,
is,
Jeff.
it is 6:49, and call this meeting adjourned.